the flavor that you're going to be tasting in your mouth. So basically what you need to do is kind of get used to what you're feeling in your mouth, what kind of aromas you're smelling, and getting used to articulating those. And the best way to do that is just keep a little notepad and pen with you and write down, smells kind of like apples. Smells kind of like pears. Smells kind of like flowers, but they're not like the dark, heavy kind of flowers, They're more like light white flowers. Okay, smells kind of like white flowers. So there's 3 things right there, right off the bat. Apples, pears, and white flowers. That's 3 good descriptors for a lot of white wines. If you've ever run into white wines, generally you're going to smell things like that, and then you're going to get other flavors and aromas too. The aromas being those of citrus or of stone fruit or of different things. So observe and write. Sniff right, sniff right, sniff right, and even sniff right, literally. You want to put your nose right down into the glass for starters and take a good deep breath and step back from it and kind of think about what it is that you're smelling. Are you smelling anything that's musty or earthy or spicy or, sweet? Are you smelling honey? Are you smelling fruit? If so, what kind of fruit are you smelling? If you can't tell what kind of fruit it is specifically, maybe you can say it's citrus. Maybe you can say it's something like apple. Maybe you can say it's something like a stone fruit, like a berry of some kind or another. So go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I remember back, I think it was just this last show, and I think it was AJ who was talking about this wheel, this
aroma wheel.
Yeah, aroma wheel that she had gotten from UC Davis, I believe.
Yeah, they developed both the wine aroma flavor, the wine aroma and flavor wheel for red wine and white wine, as well as the honey aroma wheel. Amina Harris over at the Honey and Pollination Center at the Robert Mondavi Institute at UC Davis led a group of people, a panel of people, which I was a part initially, but wasn't able to complete the last couple of tastings they did, who wrote down the different, common honeys and the common flavor attributes and aroma attributes and so on. And they developed that into a wheel that's somewhat equivalent to the wine aroma wheel for red and white wine. And I believe it was Ann Noble who initially created that for red wine and then followed up with white wine as well. But it's kind of nice because at the outside of the wheel, it has like the executive view kind of aroma. Is this woody or is it earthy or is it, and then from there it gets more and more specific as you're growing closer and closer to the center of the wheel. And it's the same way for the white wine, for the honey. The aroma wheels are very good because they help you to not only drill down on the aroma that you're smelling, but kind of give you a visualization of a way to do it, to kind of like spiral into, the most specific kind of, flavor you're going to be hitting, whatever it is. And the wheels are a really good visual guide for people who are very visual. And once you get kind of used to identifying the macro aroma that you're kind of onto, then it's, a little bit easier to drill down onto it.
Yeah.
Whether it be, earthy, musky, citric, or whatever.
Are those wheels available to the public? Can we how do you go about obtaining one of these aroma wheels?
You go to Google and type in shop for wine aroma wheel, UC Davis wine aroma wheel, or Ann Noble wine aroma wheel. And they're all over the place. Everybody sells them, but I'd recommend getting them from UC Davis or one of the links off of UC Davis for that kind of thing, because it goes to help the school, and the honey the honey wheel will go to help the Honey and Pollination Center there to keep our bees happy and healthy, as well as to support the Mead program there.
Yeah. This whole thing about aroma and smelling and training your palate. I spend a lot of time in the kitchen, and in my other life, I should have been a chef, but I love to cook, and I mean, there are certain recipes that I do from memory, but I know how they're supposed to smell. I know how they're supposed to taste. So that tells me how much spices and herbs and salt and pepper and what have you needs to go into the dish. I mean, are we talking about the same thing here?
Similar, yeah. It's very similar. As a matter of fact, cooking is a good analogy for making wine or making mead or making anything else for that matter. And I'll drill down onto that for a second. You don't really need training to break an egg and scramble it, and make a scrambled egg and add a little bit of salt and pepper and have it taste, fairly good.
Right.
But if you want to make an omelet, and you've never made one before, that's a little bit different. So you want to look at something that says like, hey, get your eggs, break them, put them into a pan, maybe add a little bit of water or milk, whichever one you want. Scramble them real good and well. If you're going to put cheese in the middle of it, here's how to do it. And you kind of follow that recipe, and then you kind of learn to do that over the course of a few weeks to where you can do it without even looking at the recipe. And you don't need to measure the salt. You don't need to measure the pepper because you're familiar with how much of either one of those you're going to be using. And, guess what? 3-4 weeks later, you're making omelets like nobody's business. And it's all like, you know what? I'd like to change this a little bit. Maybe instead of cheese, I'd like to put some sauteed onions and mushrooms and a little bit of, prosciutto in the center of it this time, maybe with a little bit of different kind of cheese and maybe with some parsley in there too. And all of a sudden now you have 2 omelets that you can make. And so like, hey, that turned out pretty good. Maybe this time I'm going to go with maybe a little bit of spinach and a couple of other things. So now you're at a point where you have the basic recipe down. You can turn a nice fluffy omelet without putting anything in it, and it tastes wonderful. You've got cheese you can put in it. You've got, a mushroom sauteed with onions. You've got spinach. You've got different kinds of things that you can put in there. So you're basically taking that recipe that you learned and using the basic recipe and then modifying it to make new and interesting things. And that's mead making is just like that. And I've said this over and over and over, and I'll keep saying it until it finally penetrates the skulls of some of the people out there that don't listen, but make a basic recipe. If you want to make all 3, basic traditional, sweet, dry, semi-sweet, make them and make them and make them until you don't have to think about it.
Yeah.
Once you've done that, then start modifying them. And, that's going to take a little while. Mead isn't exactly fast. And there's some people out there that want to make fast mead. That's fine. Learn how to make a fast mead if that's what you're into. I'm personally not. I can taste the difference between the two. I prefer, a mead that goes through a standard fermentation, that goes through, aging. And that doesn't mean I'm going to wait 3 years to taste it. I get my mead into and out of the fermenter as quickly as is reasonable for the type of yeast and the type of honey that I'm using. And the better the fermentation is managed, the quicker it's going to mature and the longer it's going to last. It's going to have less reductive and less, kind of faults to it than something that's been, pushed through in a fermentation that's too hot or has had stalls in a fermentation that's not healthy. So learn the basics, learn them right, practice them till you can do them right without thinking about it, and then take that basic recipe that you know and like and start, doing things to it, adding fruit, adding spice, adding other things to it, combining it with other meads that you have, or sitting back, blending them together to get something that's really different than what you had, with either one of the two that you blended. That's all about, developing that whole repertoire of different kinds of flavors and aromas and feels and mouth feels and layers and structure and the integration of the overall flavors and the overall complexity of what it is that you're making.
And smell and taste and write down notes. How did those mead smell like? I mean, what did they taste like? What yeast you use? Write down your notes. We're talking about aromas and keep good records. And eventually, like you say, you'd be able to make those meads without even looking at your recipe, and then start, adding fruits and whatnot, to your recipe.
Right.
So,
yeah, exactly. Develop a repertoire and then go back to it repeatedly.
Yeah. Yeah, good advice. The next question that Bernard Smith asks here is, he says, some yeast produce a peppery note, and some meads tend to contain banana or black currant flavors. Okay.
I think the peppery notes and such, and banana and black currant kind of characters, I've seen a lot in beer yeast and different kinds of everything from saisons to abbey ales to farmhouse ales and such, and Belgian bit is going to have that kind of clovey, spicy with banana estery kind of characters to it too. There are some grapes that have characteristics that are similar to that. There's a specific method of fermentation called carbonic maceration that kind of stresses tropical flavors, and when combined with the right yeast, it can give off almost like a bubblegummy tropical kind of character. There's some yeast that will enhance peppery notes in grapes and such. But for the most part, the yeast isn't really going to be the concentrator of flavor in your mead. The honey is. What the yeast will do is bring that out through the process of esterification and make it more apparent. So you want to, again, going back to tasting honey and taking good aroma notes and good flavor notes is, get a honey that has some of those kind of flavors that you really want. Go out there and try different things. Taste a bunch of honey that you really like, and then spend your time looking at some yeast that will enhance those kind of flavors. And that's why I say look at the wine yeast sites, because a lot of times they'll talk about, hey, this brings out the peppery notes in, Syrah, or this brings out the spicy notes in Zinfandel, or this brings out the cherry notes in Burgundies, or Pinot Noir. This brings out that nice peachy, appley pear kind of, flavor in Chardonnay grapes, or enhances that nice red / berry kind of character in different kinds of red wines that you're going to be, produced from red grapes. It's about identifying the key flavors and aromas that you like, and then finding a yeast that does, that's able to bring those notes out in what it is that you're going to be making, whatever batch of mead you're going to be making. If it's going to be a cherry melomel, you want to look at something that, brings out cherry notes. Anything from RC212 to L2225, kind of like enhance those cherry flavors. There's other yeast out there that'll do the same, but those are two of the more common ones that I just named off. And incidentally, L2225 is pretty good for restarting too. It's a beast.
Okay. This brings me to a question here related to the first one. Is there such thing as an aroma wheel or a yeast wheel or something for mead where, this information is like in one central place? What types of honey go with what types of yeast?
I don't think so, not yet. And that's not because there haven't been attempts to do it. I think it's because it's the breadth or the acumen that's been compiled on mead research is very, very, very small. Compared to the type of publications that are done on wine in the course of a year, it's an order of magnitude less than you'll see in wine publications. And, I just did like a little Google search on, not even a Google search. Actually, I went to the American Journal of Enology and Viticulture and did a 1-year search on the number of scholarly articles produced on wine, and it was somewhere in the hundreds. And I did the same thing in Google, looking for articles published on mead in that same 1 year. It's like 3.
Yeah.
So there's a huge disparity there, and that's because there hasn't been an active, pursuit of information, scientific, studies and scientific information on mead. And so a lot of the reason that we don't see the same kind of tools available for mead makers that we do for wine makers is because it just hasn't been seen as a beverage that,